evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Jenelle Riley. I'm the film and TV editor of Backstage, and I want to welcome you to this conversation with actor Paul Dooley. Since his scene-stealing turn in 1979's Breaking Away, Mr. Dooley has enjoyed a very lengthy, very distinguished career. It would be impossible to list even part of his credits here, but I will mention Emmy-nominated turns on The Practice and Dream On, and roles in such films as 16 Candles, Runaway Bride, and A Mighty Wind, just to name a few. He is one of those rare actors whose name in the credits guarantees you'll be seeing at least one spectacular performance. Please welcome Paul Dooley.
So how did you begin?
Sorry, I'm just struggling with this labelless water.
I'm a little concerned there's a shortage of water. Must be a drought somewhere.
So I want to start at the very beginning, if that's okay with you, of your career. When did you first discover your love of acting?
I never thought I'd be an actor, but on radio, when I was 10 or 12, I began to be very interested in the radio comedians. The ones I remember particularly were Jack Benny, Red Skelton, and Jimmy Durante. If my dad wouldn't turn to a station like Fred Allen or some of the other comedians, I'd never hear about them. So he ruled the roost with the radio. But I did fall in love with those guys, but I just was a fan. I didn't think I'm going to be an actor or anything, or certainly not a comedian. I came from a fairly poor family. My parents couldn't afford children. So a neighbor had me, but I hadn't gone to many movies, and I was about 15. I was in high school, and a kid I made friends with, his family was kind of wealthy for that town, and it took me to his house one day, and he had a 8mm projector, an 8mm camera, and a record collection. It was amazing to me. I'd seen very few films, actually. And he showed me, for the first time, Buster Keaton. And that's what made me want to be an actor. I didn't really just want to be an actor. I wanted to be Buster Keaton. And then he showed me Chaplin, silent W.C. Fields, and Laurel and Hardy, and most of them silent. Anyway, I fell in love with the whole genre. And what I wanted to be then was a silent movie comic, but the time was gone. There was no silent movies anymore, although Edison and I were very close. I should have known I could. So then I began to think about, I've heard about the vaudeville, and I had no idea, being out of the loop, that it was even dead or ailing, not feeling well. But then I thought maybe I'll do burlesque, but there was no burlesque in my hometown, and it was fading out anyway. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be a clown. That's kind of close to low comedy. And as a matter of fact, I did do that, and I used to do some clowning at events when I was in college. And when I first got to New York, I couldn't get into equity in SAG and AFTRA for a while. And so I developed a clown act, and I used to play birthday parties and sometimes TV shows, guesting around. And I paid my rent that way in the very beginning. But I went to the Navy and got out, and I thought, well, I'll just go back to the factory where I was working. Because, in my domain, in the culture I came from, none of my siblings ever finished high school, and most of my neighbors and my friends didn't finish high school, and nobody was talking about going to college in those days. So I'm just actually going back to work in this factory. And I run into this guy who had gotten me interested in comedy. And he said, he'd been in the service, he'd gotten out earlier than me. He said, I'm up at the State University, I'm doing plays all over the place, and taking art classes, and it's great. And I said, I don't want to be a college guy. Because, I thought that was for sissies or something, who knows what I thought. But he told me that, he went on and on about how I could get into plays and doing things like this. And I was also an artist, and so I wanted to I thought it might be fun to take art classes, but the clincher was the fact that he said there's a lot of pretty girls up there. A lot of, anyway, so I went to college and studied, they didn't allow us to call it the drama department, it was called speech, the speech department. And when I graduated, instead of saving with a nest egg or getting a network going in New York, I just had $50 in my pocket and I went to New York. Wow. I didn't know a soul, I didn't know anything. I didn't know there was an equity. I just went there. So that's how I got started, and except for the training I got in college, I didn't have any training because I couldn't afford training. You know, it was years and years before I got enough money ahead to go take classes with Uta Hagen or the New School or Neighborhood Playhouse, whatever it was, or certainly not Mr. Lee. But so I kind of learned, as a lot of us have probably, by doing the thing. What's interesting about going to college was I'm from West Virginia, and
someone loves it.
West Virginia wasn't exactly a center of culture in terms of, you know, what you could find in your little hometown. There was no ballet company. There was no live theater. They did have a museum there with a rather extensive collection of coal. But I didn't know it, but most of the students and myself had these accents, these kind of West Virginia accents. And most of the people who taught there had graduated from there, and they had accents, and they were teaching speech. And it's a kind of an accent that's kind of a little bit in the nose, you know, and the vowels are kind of drawn out. And what I found funny when I realized there was an accent was that I took some courses in Italian because I needed to take a language. And the teacher asked me after a week or so if I had Italians in my background. I says, no, and he says, well, you sound very much like an Italian. You really speak the language well, and I'm only saying the student has a pen, you know, those kind of things. I couldn't understand it, but then I realized I'm imitating the teacher, and I'm using my ear to imitate him, so I'm sounding the way he sounds. But this is what the other students sounded like. Even then, I could hear the difference. Questa lingua? There's a molto bella lingua. Come sta? Piacere. Grazie tanti. That's what they sounded like. So somehow I said, wait a minute, they all have accents. And I must have one too. But somehow I was doing well with the teacher, so I did very well. I liked the language so much, and I loved getting A's. So I took 8 courses, 8 semesters. So I have a minor in Italian, which doesn't help me much because I don't speak to anybody Italian. I mean, I'll speak to Italians, I don't mind, but I mean, I don't have the occasion to use the language.
Do you still remember it to this day?
About that much. My wife wants me to go back and retake the classes with her, but you know, I promise I'll do that someday.
Yeah.
I just love it. We go to restaurants, I read the menu out loud, and I'll say, I'll have the Barbanelli, and they'll say, that's the manager, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm crazy about the language and the people, and it's very beautiful, and it flows, and all those vowels, you know. Not like German with all the consonants.
Yeah.
But I love that language. Anyway, I had to, over time, without really making a strong effort at it, I just lost my accent by being around other actors in New York. And
so even when you were in the Navy, you didn't notice that you talked different from other people?
Well, there were a lot of guys. I was on a ship, and they were from all over the country, and they all had accents. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you don't hear your own accent. You talk to somebody who's from Brooklyn, they don't know they've got an accent. You really don't, because you've heard it all your life, and you think that's the way it's supposed to be.
Was it at college that you first got on the stage?
Yeah, I wasn't planning on being an actor. I just wanted to be all those other comedy types, but they all petered out, you know. So I was in a few plays. I did You Can't Take It With You, but I never thought of ever being a dramatic actor. I think I like comedy because I think I'd like to hide behind it. It's my theory that actors who do comedy are afraid of drama because it's emotional. And for many, many years, I just did comedy parts on the stage and in early television. and anywhere I worked. But Robert Altman kind of discovered me for the movies, and he right away just gave me a part with a lot of drama.
Same guy from West Virginia.
Yeah.
That's Robert Altman.
So he put me in a part. He saw me do comedy, but he gave me a part that had a lot of drama in it, in a movie called A Wedding. And then he just kept putting me in movie after movie after movie. And I discovered, I guess I can do drama. You know, I had a big discovery. I did my first movie. It should be encouraging to young actors. When I was 49.
Wow.
So I've been very busy since then. But most of my movies, a lot of my movies have been drama. Even though I'm very happy. I love to do comedy, but I like to do all of it. But he sort of pushed me into it. And oh, here's what I found out. I made this strange discovery when I was about 50 years old. I saw myself in the dailies for this first movie I did with Bob. And I said, hey, I'm not bad. I can do drama too. And look, I have good dramatic timing. And then it struck me, it's just timing. It's not comic, it's not dramatic, it's just timing. But I didn't know that. I thought, you know, comedians had great comedy timing, but they wouldn't necessarily translate that into, you know, doing drama. It's one thing. It's a sense of when to do it, how long to take, you know.
Now, how did your family react when you told them you were moving to New York with $50 in your pocket to be an actor?
I don't think they understood what the whole idea was of acting, but they weren't the kind of family that discouraged me or encouraged me. They probably thought privately I should have stuck with the factory because you don't make any money in college. And I made very little money when I first got to New York, too. I never made any money in New York until I did my first commercial, and then I made a lot of money. But it took me 9 years to give up my part-time jobs.
Oh.
I mean, I had jobs, but my first job there, I was there 3 or 4 months working in some part-time job, and I'd gone to college with Don Knotts. He was ahead of me by 3 years, but we met in my first year there, and we became friends, and we palled around, and we did comedy sometimes for fraternities and things. And Don had already had 3 years of college, gone to the service, and spent 2 years entertaining the troops. So he was a full-fledged, experienced comedian. He had even been, at 14 years old, a comedian with a ventriloquist dummy. And the dummy sounded just like Don. He said, hey, Billy, what is it, Don? I used to call Don up and back in our college town, and I'd say, his wife's name was Kay at the time. I'd say, she'd say, hello. I said, hi, Kay, is Don there? This is Don. Of course, I knew that, but he showed me my first magic trick. Oh, I happened to have the top of a thing. He showed me my first magic trick, and then slowly I started studying, you know. He didn't tell me how to get rid of it, you know. But he got me hooked on magic, which I did in my clown act. I had taught myself to juggle by myself when I was about 14. I just kind of figured out how it must work. I lived on a gravel road and out in the country, and I just pick up rocks and juggle. And if you drop one, which you do frequently when you're learning, I just pick up any of them because they're all the same.
Yeah.
Didn't matter.
So some of the early jobs you had when you moved to New York, clown, magician.
I used to park cars. I used to open doors. I found this company that just a franchise that went to all the restaurants and nightclubs around town and provided people to do these jobs. So I could say I want to work next week, and they let me work that week, and I want to be off the week after. Fine. It was one of those freelancey kind of things. The best part-time job I ever had was $5 a night. I was not the maitre d', but an assistant to the maitre d', helping take people's names down and helping them get seated and things like that. It was at the Village Vanguard, which is a very, very famous jazz room in New York, all the way back to Judy Holliday playing there and Adolph Green when they were a quartet. And it had wonderful jazz names there. And my friends would say to me, you mean to tell me you get to see Charles Mingus, Thelonious Monk, Dizzy Gillespie, all of these people for free? I say, no, I get to see Lenny Bruce, Mort Saul, Professor Irwin Corey, Orson Bean. I saw Mike and Elaine, Nichols and May, make their debut in New York there. And to be paid to watch that every night, And I was so impressionable, I learned all of their acts. It was 3 or 4 nights in a row. And it was a great experience for me. And I was at the same time trying to break in as a stand-up. And I finally did do stand-up. And I did it for 2 or 3 years. And I played a number of clubs. And I was canceled in a number of clubs. Generally, what I wanted to do seemed to be a little too hip for the room kind of thing. Yeah. It was at a time when Bob Newhart, Shelley Berman, and Jonathan Winters, and Nichols and May were getting started. And I guess I was in a group where we wanted to use our intelligence in the comedy. And I did well in New York and sometimes in LA and San Francisco. And I died in Dallas and Philadelphia and Boston because there just wasn't the right kind of club. Mm-hmm. I was booked in a club in Boston called the Frolics. The minute I saw the name on the contract, I said, I know I'm not going to do well there. I asked a friend of mine, an improviser friend, you ever play the Frolics? He said, oh yeah. I said, what's it like? What's the audience like? He said, there's a lot of tattoos. Anyway, I enjoyed it when I was doing well, but I didn't enjoy it when I wasn't doing well, and that's probably true of all comics. And so I was able to get into Second City, and I gave it all up because I discovered that I'd like a pair of eyes to work to, and I'd much rather do sketch acting, comedy acting, than to stand alone out there with the mic. And I was really good if the audience was with me, but I wasn't so good when they weren't. I didn't have that chutzpah and that kind of drive and that kind of a healthy arrogance that comics need to fight an audience into submission, The best comedians learn that over the years by playing to bad audiences. But my act was a little closer to someone like a Newhart, where you couldn't stand anybody making too much noise, you know, because you're trying to work in a quiet way. It was really like an actor trying to be a comedian rather than
more like a one-man
actual
show.
Comedian, yeah. And it worked well if I was in theaters, Sometimes I get booked into a review and do some of my things, and it always worked well with audiences. But that's the one thing that scared me in show business was stand-up, and I was never scared of anything else, Broadway, whatever, television, movies. But boy, that's hard to be out there alone by yourself.
Did you get heckled much?
Mostly just indifference, a lot of talking.
That's worse.
But I was doing Shakespeare parodies. You can imagine some of the clubs I went to didn't get it. Although I was successful enough that I did the Tonight Show. Edison was there. It was very early. No, it was not Steve Allen, but Jack Parr. Mm-hmm. I did several visits there. But I gave it all up when I found I could join an improvisational company. The company was Alan Arkin and most of the originals. They had come to Broadway from Chicago. And then after the Broadway run, they went down in Greenwich Village near New York University, and they were a huge success there. And they were there for several years, and I worked with them. I joined them as an understudy, not knowing how to improvise, but they wanted to give these guys a vacation for a change, because the first half of Second City Improv show is a set show, and the second half was improvised, trying to create a new show for the first part. So I was hired just to let people take vacations and learn things that were set, frozen. And then when it was all over, they said, well, you may as well stay now, you know everything. But I only learned it by being pushed on stage.
And how did you get that opportunity?
A friend of mine, I would never have heard about this, but a friend of mine was the assistant bartender at this club. He was a composer, and that was his bread and butter job. He said, they're going to have, I'd seen it on Broadway because I was fascinated by the thing. I read about it in Time magazine, and I heard it was coming to New York. I went down to see him. He says, they're having auditions Monday night, or Monday during the day, but if you come down Sunday night, I'll introduce you to the director. So they never ended up doing the other auditions. It's one of those things, so they kind of like to keep it simple and in-house. And I thought after the show, he would put me on the stage and give me something to read. I had no idea what they'd expect of an understudy. But these sketches that I was learning to replace people in weren't even written down. You just had to watch them 3 or 4 times and get the idea. Make notes if you needed to. So he says, no, there's no script. I said, what do you want me to do? And he says, well, go on tonight in the set after the intermission. And I had no idea what to do. So I went on with Alan Arkin, and I'm sure he led me through it, but I got hired. I have no idea if I was doing anything right. But how could you go wrong with him? Many people don't know it, but Alan is an amazing dialectician. He can do.
Really?
Oh yeah, his first movie was The Russians Are Coming, where he's a Russian. One of his next movies was called Popeye, where he had a Puerto Rican accent for the whole movie. And he's done a lot of those, Greeks, Jews. He's really wonderfully transforms himself. Of recent years, his parts have not been that, far afield. He's more or less playing himself in a lot of, as he
You
gets
mean a
older.
heroin abusing
Yeah.
grandfather?
In fact, I hadn't seen him in at least 15 years, and about 4 weeks ago, I went to Albuquerque and did a small part in a movie he did down there, and so we were renewing our acquaintance, but he's a favorite of mine.
So it was a lot of on-the-job training, it sounds like, working with these people.
Yeah, I just had to learn it as I went along, and although I've done it off and on for 40 years, to be honest, I think I'm a pretty good improviser, but there are many, many people I work with that are better at it than I am. I think I'm a better actor than I am an improviser. But you'll see later, because we're going to do some improvisation. And
Yes.
you'll be the judge.
What did stand-up comedy and improvisation teach you about being an actor, if anything?
Well, as I say, I didn't have much training, and I had this opinion of myself. I'm sure we all have it. Before Second City, I thought, well, I'm about a 7 on the scale of how good you can be as an actor, because when you're the best one in your college, you think that means something. So we've all been through that. Then you get to New York, and everybody there is the best one from his school, and they're all out of work. So I thought maybe I'm a 7 out of a 10. And then I did Second City and paid no attention to what it might mean to me as an actor. But when I came out of there, I thought, well, maybe I'm a 9 now, because it gave me so much confidence to be on stage. And I was never, ever scared to be on stage in case someone dropped a line. I would welcome it. I'd love to be in a play where someone forgot their line. That would be great. And I've forgotten my own lines a few times, and if you've done this improvisation for a while, you really feel secure doing anything on stage. So I found it was a great training ground, although nobody was saying, do this, do that. It's deceptively easy to improvise. I mean, I know it's hard, but there's only 2 rules: listen and agree. That's all you have to know how to do. And you have to be kind of courageous in the beginning. So some of our greatest actors are put off by it, and they're wary of it if they haven't got a script. Mm-hmm. But you'd be surprised if they took some workshops. You listen and agree, and the stuff invents itself. You feed off the other actor and try not to play right, and it'll become a play of sorts, if you just use each other. So in a way, it's a little methody,
Now, I just learned this today, and this just fascinates me. You were a writer on the Electric Company. How did that happen?
I was the writer.
You were the head writer.
Yeah. I created the pilot. When I came out of Second City, all those people were asked to do commercials. A lot of them didn't want to do it because people were still looking down their noses at commercials. But I thought it'd be fun, So I got to where I did a lot of radio commercials, and they hired us guys from Second City because we always improved the commercial by throwing things in. Well, after 4 or 5 years of this, some friends of mine and I said, wait a minute, we're writing their damn commercials. They have copywriters they're paying, but we're making the commercials work. So we figured out a little company, and then they came to us to do commercials and say, let us write them, and let us put them together. And tell us what you want to say with the copy points. And so we did a couple of thousand of those over about 15 years. And that was one of the most fun things I ever did, because there's no makeup, no wardrobe, no hair, no lighting, no waiting, no Winnebagos. And I really loved doing that. Anyway, someone had heard that I'd written these radio commercials. We called it writing because the client didn't like to give you nice salaries for a piece of material if it doesn't exist. So we'd improvise it, we'd make a copy, show it to him, because it's never funny on paper,
right?
Usually. But we really just improvised them. When a guy would say, when can you have 4 commercials for me? And we'd say tomorrow. Then he'd say, and you want how much money? So then we realized if they think it takes a short time, it's not worth anything. We would do it live sometimes for a client. He'd say, well, you were just fooling around. Yeah, but we had 10 years experience. So he used to say, you need 4 spots? We need a week, maybe 2 weeks. And the day before the booking, we'd call each other up and says, let's meet tonight and knock out 4 commercials.
Yeah.
It was easy. But they called me up to come in to an untitled show, the big brother, if you will, of Sesame Street, help teach reading to kids a little older. Sesame Street was up to 3 or 4, and this was from 4 to 7 or something. And some other copywriters around town who were probably out of work. And we all just wrote in limbo for 6 weeks for a show which had no cast, no title, no format. The only specification was it should help teach reading. And we all wrote feverishly and handed things in. And they came to me at the end and said, would you be the head writer and write the pilot? And what I found, through no plan of my own, is that most of the stuff I wrote, because I'm an inveterate punster, the name of the star of the segment had some joke in the title. A guy who mixed up messages. I named him Fargo North Decoder. And they loved these characters, and they became the characters on the show. And these producers loved me. They wanted me to act in it and direct the sketches and write the thing. And I can't do all of that. It takes time to write. So they let me cast the show, and I hired Morgan Freeman, who was there 7 years. Cosby was already committed to it, and Rita Moreno, because of their links to their base. And everybody worked for Scale. It ran 7 years. I left after the first year, but my characters continued.
Mm-hmm. Why did you leave after a year?
I wanted to go back to acting. Mm-hmm. And like being in a series or creating something, it's great fun in the beginning when it's creative and being put together. And then it's like a maintenance job, like being in a long run play. It's fun for 2 or 3 months. Then you pinned it down where you want it. Now it's like going to a factory and doing it. And it's kind of hard to keep it fresh and alive. So I got tired of it. But while I was doing it, I loved it. I said to a close friend of mine at the time, I finally feel I'm using my comedy ability for good instead of evil. Because, if you teach a handful of kids to read or interest them in reading, we were always hiding the message. And that's what you do in commercials, especially humorous commercials. You get the information through, but they're not supposed to catch on to it. I created a character where one of the actresses was teaching a gorilla to read. And in that manner, the kids looked over the gorilla's shoulder, over her shoulder, as she's teaching him to read. And he fails all over the place, so the kids watching feel smarter than the gorilla. And doesn't look like they've been taught at, because she's teaching someone else who's stupider than them, even though they're just learning. And he was doing it in monosyllables. He was grunting, really. But we tried to make it so the kids didn't think we're teaching at them.
Right.
But they thought they were overhearing it,
You tricked them into learning.
In a way, yeah. But I still meet people who loved that thing, and they kind of grew up watching it. And my wife used to come home from school and watch it. My wife is younger than me.
In Hollywood, I'm shocked.
My wife is 25 years younger. She's actually 26 years younger, but I thought that would sound weird.
So do you consider, I guess, Second City maybe your big break, or do you believe there's...
It was, I believe in big breaks, and it was I thought it was my big break, and then a lot of people knew me because of that, and I would do some plays, and I got into a lot of reviews around New York because I like broad comedy, or the kind of comedy you can do in a sketch that you can't quite do in a play. And then I went to audition for The Odd Couple, and I got the job, the original, and that was a big break. Particularly because I was a poker player in the cast, but I understudied Art Carney, and at a certain point, Art Carney left, and I was the standby, and I went on and played Felix opposite Walter Matthau.
Wow.
And that was a big, but to show you how crazy this business is, 2 weeks after I started playing Felix on Broadway, I began to get all these calls through my agent from California about being in pilots. And there were like 20 of them or something. Many times they offered me the lead in a pilot, or they were interested in having me fly out. And I kept saying, well, word gets around if you go on Broadway and you get some, good attention. So comes to find out, none of that came from my being on Broadway.
Really?
I was on a commercial which played on the Oscar cast. Everybody in the industry is watching. Those who don't go to the bathroom or go for a beer see me in these close-up commercials, and they think I'm the new guy. They think I'm the new Dick Van Dyke or something. I look fairly normal, and I can be a little charming, and I can do takes, and I get all these calls. George Burns called me at my house. You know, a lot of people. George Burns says, I told William Morris to go to hell. Just give me his home number. He probably started William Morris. Yeah. But it was a big flurry. And the funny thing is, I was very happy doing the play. And I noticed that all the pilots they sent me were crap. And I mistakenly thought, I know better now, that if they spent 3 or 4 months writing the pilot, how good's it going to be when they're writing one every week? Mm-hmm. I learned later from being on a number of sitcoms that they do get better, and they get better at what they're doing, and they have more people writing episodes than the people who wrote the pilot, and they can improve and get better as they go along. But I turned everything down. I never did one of them.
You weren't tempted by the money? I mean...
No, oddly enough, I wasn't. But I went from $300 a week playing the poker player to $700 a week playing Felix. And I happen to know that Art was getting $3,500. I'll tell you a funny story about that time. The first time I did it with Matthau, I got a call the next day from William Morris. And they said, we talked to Walter Matthau as our client. He said, you went on last night for Carney, and you did very, very well. He was very impressed with what you did. You got all your laughs, and you remembered all your lines. And we were wondering if you have representation. And I said, I do. Who is it? I said, you guys. Probably what it was is there was an agent that handled people on the level of Matthau, mm-hmm. and then it was my agent. When I first signed there, I had an agent, and I wasn't working in television or films, maybe a little in legit, but I had 3 agents in 3 categories, and they were all named Bernie. There's a lot of Bernie going on.
Are you still with William Morris to this day, I wonder?
No, I've gone from there to ICM to all over the place.
How did you get your first agent? Because I know that for so many actors is, one of the big goals.
Oh, when I joined Second City and they came to New York, William Morris fell all over them and signed everybody. Not that it meant anything, mm-hmm. But I did have an agent at that time. They signed Arkin and all these people, just one fell swoop, they signed everybody, hoping they would strike some magic. And they don't know who's good and who isn't, they just sign everybody. Or they thought they had something there. And they did, many of them go on to do very, very well, especially Alan.
So what was this commercial on the Oscar broadcast that was so powerful?
I was asked to go to a commercial reading and smoke, and I don't smoke. Never have. Never will. So I would like to get the job and make the money. So at home I said, I'll go. And at home I started practicing inhaling. And at first you cough a little, and pretty soon you get the idea of holding it in. But I was afraid at the audition if I took too many puffs, I would sure to cough and I wouldn't be able to pull it off. So unbeknownst to me, I did a really good thing. I would take a puff of it and I would look at the cigarette lovingly for a long time so I wouldn't have to do more puffs. And it was like kind of making love to the cigarette with my eyes, So it took a couple of puffs, but I got the job. On the set, I also limited the thing. Apparently what they fell in love with, the client and the people who watched the Oscar cast, is that I was doing a lot of communication with my face, and it was kind of cute and charming. I'd do little takes and turn to people next to me, and it was just mugging, really. But they were like this, Commercial is at a ballpark, and one guy says, Harvey has a good thing going. And the next guy says, Harvey has a good thing going. And they say to me that, and I say, Harvey has, wait a minute, I'm Harvey. Voiceover, and the good thing Harvey has going is the good taste of Kent. But ran for 3 or 4 years, and taxi drivers would say to me, you're Harvey, You get more well-known in a commercial. What they didn't know on the Oscar cast is I was in another commercial there where I was wearing a space helmet, so they wouldn't recognize me. That's not why I wore it, but I happened to be in another commercial then. Because I was very, very busy. I did a lot of commercials. One time at the end of the year when you get that W2, W4 thing, I got 194 W4s.
Wow.
That means a lot of radio and some voiceover. And among all those jobs, there are only like 6 or 8 really good Class A network commercials, but you do it in the volume, if you can. I really love the radio business. I think it's really a lot of fun.
It sounds like this commercial, this cigarette commercial, you kind of got to pay homage to those silent comedians you liked so much.
Well, I do like to work without words, You don't find it very often these days when you get a job. Nobody seems to care about trying to do something interesting or funny. I'd love to do a whole movie without speaking, I think it'd be great fun.
I'd pay to see that. Were there any specific mentors or people who helped you along the way? You mentioned Robert Altman put you in his first movie.
Well, Don Knotts got me my first job. My inspirations were Sid Caesar and Gleason, who were the greatest sketch comedians I'd ever seen. Although the generation before them I admire as well, which is Burt Lahr and people like that from the stage. And I even saw Lahr on the stage 3 or 4 times when I first came to New York. So those are the people I looked up to. Then I fell in love with Nichols and May, who really, brought comedy to a whole other kind of place. I was doing a Jules Feiffer off-Broadway play, $300 a week, 1977. But in it they were all comic strips, and I played like 25 people in very short comic strip sketches. And Robert Altman's wife, Catherine, saw it, and she asked him to come the next night. Bob says, I don't want to see any plays. I don't want to see any reviews. No, I think there's a guy there. I know you're looking for the guy in your movie. He said, well, I'll go to the first act. So he goes to the first act, and he stays for the second act. And he comes downstairs and says to me, I'd like you to come to my office tomorrow and talk to me. And immediately the other 3 actors hated me. But I learned later from Catherine that he was watching me and the thing, and I had a moment where I was a nervous guy having an affair with, I was 40 or something, but I was having an affair in a hotel with a woman, but I was nervous about it, and either she was married or I was married or both. And as I walked from one part of the stage over toward the bed, I did this gesture, 2 snaps to cover my embarrassment. And he turned to his wife, he said, that's it, that's the guy. So I played Carol Burnett's husband in the wedding. And it was a really big part because I was the father of the bride, and it's a wedding. My friend Marjorie Bond was in it, who's sitting right there. Anyway, Bob then proceeded to put me in pretty close order 5 movies, including Popeye, where I did Wimpy with Robin Williams.
So the West Virginia guy loves Popeye too. Had you tried to break into films before that, or had you been content?
It's very hard in New York because for every film shot in New York, there's 50 done out here. For example, when television was going, at one point you had Bill Cosby, that's it. Everything else is California. Now it's Law and Order with 3 or 4 Law and Orders, but that's it. It's very limited back there because Hollywood's the seat of power. The agents are here, the money's here, it's all here. Whether we like it or not, it's here. And so I would go and audition for things. And even before I did this rather good part with Robert Altman, I had done things as a day player. I was in the original Out of Towners with Jack Lemmon.
That's right, you were like a porter.
I was a hotel clerk at the Waldorf Astoria. And I was in Slapshot for one day, which is a nice film, Paul Newman. I was in Up the Down Staircase. I was in a couple of others.
Your first time on a movie set, were you scared or surprisingly comfortable in front of the camera?
It never bothered me. It bored the hell out of me, as we all know the movie set is like. But my range of emotions are like from here to here, They sometimes say an actor showed the range of emotions from A to B. Well, the kind of person I turned out to be based on my family and who I am is that I'm always hiding my emotions, and I still am like that. And coincidentally, I play all these characters who are just like that. when I did Breaking Away, I imitated my father, and it did so well that I've done about 40 fathers, and they're always almost the same guy, who's a little difficult for him to show his emotions. But in the end, he's kind of a nice guy, and he has a heart of gold. But I was never nervous or afraid on a movie set or on a stage, only in stand-up for some reason, where it counted.
Well, once you get through that, I think you can do anything.
You know, someone called me, you're talking about stand-up, about 2 years ago. Some of my friends are here tonight, went to this event, asked me to do stand-up, and I hadn't done it in 40 years. And I looked at my old material, and most of it didn't work, although I did do a Shakespeare parody. So I wrote some new stuff, because I found a hook, which was I was the world's oldest stand-up comedian. So I said to the audience, in telling them my age, as I'm in my very late 60s, I'm 74, and I'm actually 75, but I thought it would sound weird. I say, my friends tell me I don't look it. In fact, when I came in tonight, I was carded. But 75, yeah, but I like to think of it as like 32 Celsius. And in that evening, I did a joke, which I'm fond of, where I said, my wife and I like to give back to the community and give to charities. And we saw the signs on the highways, Bette Midler is adopting a highway, and General Electric's, you know, so individuals as well as companies are adopting a highway. And so we thought, you know, about that, and we decided it was something we'd like to do. The thing is, my wife can't have highways. We've tried. I mean, we really tried. We tried and tried. Basically, I blame myself. Anyway, we signed up, and the thing is, you don't know what highway you're going to get. You don't know what it's going to look like. There's a long waiting list. And I said to the audience, I wish I'd brought pictures. I have pictures. We finally got one. And little 405, we named it. And I wish I'd brought the pictures, because even though it's not my biological highway, there is a kind of, it has my shoulders. We were all worried, my wife and I, about, you know, a difference in religion between the two of us. How you'd raise the highway. We finally decided if the highway's mother is Jewish, the highway would be raised Jewish. Very smart, too, our little adopted highway. Very smart. You know, who knows what the future could hold for little 405? You know, how far he could go. San Diego, Sacramento, you know, never know. That was my 70s stand-up. But nobody wants to book someone that age into Funny Bone in Seattle or anything like that. That's okay. I occasionally do it for friends or on the stage, or someone says, do 5 minutes at this benefit.
Now, you mentioned the wonderful film Breaking Away, for which you won a National Board of Review Award. Mm-hmm. Did you know when you were making that film that you guys were on to something special?
I knew it was a very wonderful script. That Steve Tessich won the Oscar for it. Mm-hmm. I read 3 pages. I said, oh, this is great. And it's my father. And Steve said he wrote his father. I played my father. He said the same thing. And he grew up in Czechoslovakia. I'm sorry, Yugoslavia. Came here when he was 12 or something. But the guy he wrote about, who couldn't show his emotions and was kind of wisecracks, but underneath he was okay, was the same guy my dad was. And as it turns out, I think the same guy many people's dads were, because it's a very universal character, I find. I meet people from, you know, Maine to Mexico who say, it was just like my dad. And then when I did 16 Candles, women all over the place come up to me and they say, I wish you were my dad. I wish my dad had been you. What they don't notice is with their dad, they'd never change, and even on their deathbed, they're still the same way they were, usually. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the movie, you know, he can come down in the middle of the night and be terribly understanding and That's why it appeals to people, because
Yeah.
it's the idealization of a dad. Anyway, I've been playing fathers ever since. Julia Roberts, Toni Collette, Mia Farrow, Hilary Swank. There's just tons of them. Almost all women for some reason.
You have some very talented kids on stage or on screen. I know that you continued to perform on stage while having this flourishing acting career. Did you have a preference, or did you like the balance of going back and forth?
No, I do like being on the stage. I don't do much out here. I did 2 plays at the Pasadena Playhouse on mornings at 7 at the Amundsen 3 or 4 years ago, with a brilliant cast of Frances McDormand and Julie Haggerty and Buck Henry and Piper Laurie, and it's just tons of them. Get 8 of them, and they were all one better than the other. I love that stuff. It's really great. In fact, I got an offer. I'm thinking of going back to New Jersey to do Sunshine Boys with Jack Klugman.
Really?
Yeah, in the Regional Theater in outside New York.
Everyone just mentally booked their tickets to New Jersey just now.
But I mean, I figured, where is a guy like myself are going to get that part, a chance to do that again? So I had worked with Klugman once before, and he called me about it, so I'm looking forward to that. I do love the stage. What I like about films is, like, you're sitting at home and there it is. And it's around for your relatives, your progeny to see, and your grandchildren down the line, some of this stuff. And also, it's a little bit of a record of a performance, and sadly, we don't have records of stage performances. They don't register as well, even if you film them, as good as they are when you're there. So in a way, it's like recording some of the things you've done. I don't like the day-by-day work, going to a film set.
Yeah.
It's 12 hours of work and half-hour filming. So that's not fun, sitting in a Winnebago. But I usually don't turn them down.
I imagine that at this point you must be getting a lot of offers for different film and TV work. How do you choose your roles?
I take the first one that comes in. I have too much of a mindset of the way I was in the beginning. No, I don't very often turn anything down.
Really?
Well, I have evolved over time what I think is a way of trying to get the most out of what I do. Sometimes they're thankless parts, character actors. They're not expected to have an arc. I starred in 2 movies where I had an arc. That's one more than Noah. So when you have an arc like Breaking Away, where you're one thing and you develop and you change, and audiences love that and actors love that too, that really makes the kind of a performance where people really remember you because something happened to you. But if you just are the judge and you have 12 lines or 9 lines, So my description of some of the parts I get is that someone hands me a warm, damp washcloth of a part, and my job is to do this, and get a performance, You're going to go so far if it's a dumb script, but you try to find ways to bring it to life, make it more dramatic or more comic. Or you don't always have to follow the words to make it comic. There are ways to make something comic or dramatic just by the way you do it. Use your timing.
You've worked with so many amazing directors. I'm going to put John Hughes in that category, but from John Hughes to Robert Altman, what do you think makes a good director? What do you hope for when you are working with one?
Well, most of them have the same thing in common. I also work for Soderbergh and Chris Nolan and Christopher Guest. Most of them leave you alone and let you do what you want to do. And the reason they know you can do that is they picked you for that reason. Christopher Guest never says a word to me or anybody else about how to do it. But when you pick Catherine O'Hara, you don't have to tell her anything. She's going to bring more to the role than you can even imagine. And Eugene and Fred Willard and all those people, Balaban. I was amazed because I'd only kind of worked with stage directors. And I first worked with Bob Altman. I kept wondering, when's he going to tell me how to do it? But he never did in all those movies. He rarely tells anyone how to do it. He puts together the package. He creates the thing that will create the ambiance, and he lets things happen. He's very much, I liken him to an artist who used found objects, because he puts actors in and they don't seem to go with the other actor, but together they create something. And he loves to find lucky accidents and mistakes and includes them. And if you ever look at his films for that, you'll see all over the place stuff you'll never see in another film, just unusual ways of working. and we've lost him recently. And I was happy to go to his memorial because a lot of people got up and talked about how much he meant to them. He loved actors, and you can't say that about every single director. And he didn't treat the principals and the character people different from the extras. There was no thing like special dressing rooms. You can't get in line to eat unless you have the big part, you know. It was very, very, very democratic. And that's the way those scenes seem to be, a bunch of people behaving together.
Is there anything, I was thinking about how, you know, you worked with Altman several times, you've done a few films with Christopher Guest. You've kind of become like a repertory player for some of these great directors. Is there a secret to getting asked back, or?
I don't know what it is. I knew Chris Guest when he was 17. His mother was my agent.
Really?
And we once did a television show using a lot of Second City actors, and she helped put it together. We did it on PBS, and he appeared in a number of those sketches. And I was playing his guitar even then. But I always liked him, and you know, he just called me one day and said, I'm doing, waiting for Guffman, and would you like to do something in it? I said, sure. But I didn't court him or anything, or I really didn't keep in touch, you know, but I always admired him because he's like a genius. His acting alone is a genius, you know. Look at Corky Sinclair. How many performances you see that are that real?
And with Christopher Guest films, is there a script or an outline?
It's like an outline of 12 pages. Larry David's the same thing.
Yeah, you play Cheryl David's father on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And you get to do some improvisation there as well.
It's all improvised. There's just an outline. But they don't even show most of us the outline. They just say, you guys are here, we come in, we mentioned this, that's it. You know, because Larry's there and he can guide it. And although we improvise at the time, at the moment, hoping to come up with something brilliant, I have a secret theory that Larry comes to work with some jokes in his back pocket. Why wouldn't he? He's a writer. He's the star. He might know what he wants to say in the scenes. He could bring it there, you know. We just really follow him in those scenes. We're not there to be as funny as he is or as interesting. And we're there to make the scene work for him. And I have a lot of funny lines that they've cut, too. But I feel free, you know, to say anything I want to.
Yeah.
He's great to work with. And my lovely wife, about 4 weeks ago, got a part as Cheryl Hines' psychiatrist.
Really? Acting debut?
No,
Okay.
she's an actress, but she doesn't act that often. In fact, my wife is the creator of my so-called life, which kept her busy for a while. And she's one of the co-creators of Wicked. So she's got her work cut out for her.
Now playing at the Pantages Theater and all of it.
Anyway, when she does act, she's wonderful, but she is very busy with her writing career most of the time.
Any professional rivalry there? Or she put you in a lot of her stuff, so.
She did. No, actually, she didn't so much as the other writers on those shows.
Really?
I was in my so-called life as Claire Danes' grandfather, of course. And I was in 30-something. I went Once and Again. I played Celia Ward's boss for a while. I imagine it helped to know her.
Yeah.
Sometimes the writers would just write me in.
And know that you'll do it.
We don't have any professional jealousy. Just jealousy over looking at other women and things like that. We get along very well. I should have mentioned her when I talked about my inspirations because she's one of my inspirations. She keeps me young and I help her grow up. We fell in love and it was either marry her or adopt her. And we have a 21-year-old who is already a fantastic writer.
Really?
Wonderful writer already. Already has jobs and she's still in college.
Yeah. Which college, if I may ask?
I sent her to West Virginia so she'd learn the accent. She's in Bennington.
Oh, wow.
And she graduates this June. But believe it or not, she has an assignment to write a screenplay.
Wow.
So, and she's really, she probably was born with something of her own, but she's certainly got some genetics from my wife. And she's funny. Maybe she got something from me. She's very, very funny.
Now, you mentioned what you like in directors. Have you ever worked with any directors that maybe you didn't have a good relationship with? You don't have to name names or anything.
No, I wouldn't mention his name. 2 days' work in the original Death Wish, Charles Bronson. He was the director. Everybody hated him. I'll give you an idea. He's the kind of guy who picks on the extras and makeup and hair and wardrobe, a bully. Probably didn't pick on Charles Bronson. I'm playing a cop and there are 3 hookers and I'm arresting them on the streets of New York. It's February, the cold wind's coming in off the Hudson, 2 in the morning, everyone's freezing. The crew is wearing parkas and ski masks. And they says, oh, Michael's on his way over, step out here. And we huddled to, he'd tell us what to do in the scene. It was all just movement, there was no dialogue. And as I have my hands in my pockets, I'm listening to him, and the hookers have these short skirts, and they're shivering. And at a certain point in the conversation, he stops, he says to me, you have your hands in your pockets while the director's speaking to you? Anyway, not so much from what he did to me, but everybody hated him. He's one of those guys. He's not doing directing anymore. But he was, mostly they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find most actors pretty good. I don't meet too many people that are really pains in the ass.
Well, I know you've worked with actors like Julia Roberts and Paul Newman at the peak of their career. Do you notice like a common thread that all these great actors have that, makes the public so drawn to them?
Well, a lot of those people have simplicity in their acting. They're good for film because of the simplicity, Not all of those actors might make a stage actor, And some of them have tried, not those 2, although Julia did do a play recently. I happen to like subtlety in acting, and the actors I like have a lot of that. I love Anthony Hopkins, who is never over the top, but he's always incredibly good, and as far back as Spencer Tracy. I love to underplay, and you can do it in films because it's all so close, which is not as easy to do on stage. But I admire actors who exhibit taste and have respect for the audience's intelligence,
Are there any sort of actors of this new generation that give you hope?
Well, as I say, I love Chris Guest and a lot of those people who work with him. And at first, you might think Chris is just a comedian, but if you think of some of the characters he's created, for example, Corky Sinclair, who's obviously playing a gay guy, is not the kind of a performance he's going to make the gay community hate it,
right,
to think he's making fun of them, because he invests it with a certain humanity. And it's a real two-dimensional, he really digs deep and plays that character as a real person, not as a caricature, although it seems to be a caricature. But the fact that many critics will say that his movies are so great because he's fond of his characters, he's affectionate toward them. And what he does is satire, and the definition of satire has always been you stand back and look at what you're doing, or you look at the subject, and you're kind of making fun of it. That's what satire is. There's a cold, analytical, bloodless quality to it. But his films don't have that, even though they're highly satirical. It's because those actors, somehow, they're good enough actors that they imbue the satire with believability and, good acting.
And you recognize, you see real people, and I think most people who, took high school drama classes probably recognize Corky Sinclair as their teacher.
Yeah. And when Bob Balaban is jealous of him and Guffman, he usually does the musicals at the college, His jealousy is palpable.
Yeah.
He's just great, and he doesn't do much with it. He just looks dour, He's a terrific guy, too. He's directed me before. And Arkin has directed me, and I was directed by Elaine May, and Mike Nichols was a couple of the thrills of my life. So my big breaks were The Odd Couple and joining Second City and working for Robert Altman.
I'm curious, especially like working with Christopher Guest, I know you guys shoot hours of footage that don't make it into the final film.
Yeah.
Is it hard as an actor when you go to see the final product and it's maybe not what you imagined?
Not for me, because when you do, and if you're in an improvisational company and you do 20 sketches in an evening, there are always a number of them that aren't nearly as funny as you hope they would be. There's a sort of a wheat and the dross, or what do you call it, the chaff. And, there's always a certain percentage, and not all brilliant. And so we're kind of used to that when we improvise. The thing is, the audience has such goodwill toward improvisation, they'll let you get by with a couple of the boring ones, because you've entertained them, and they also have the common understanding with you. It's a contract that you're really making it up, and so if you fail, we'll forgive you, and if you succeed, we'll be very responsive. So they're good audiences because they're willing to go along with the thing. But there's some bad improvs done. It's a gamble. It can't all be brilliant.
Stuff you're glad they cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never missed it too much from the things they cut of mine.
What about some of your other films? I mean, has there ever been a performance that you saw on screen that was completely not what you intended?
It would be humble of me to say so, but no. No, I kind of approve of what I did. Also, another question sometimes young actors ask me is about how you prepare, and this isn't the politically correct way to answer it, but my answer is I just follow my instincts. I certainly think it's fine, all those actors who have a preparation and they need time and they want to get deep into their character. And it turns out that's not the way it is with me. It's almost when they say, stand by or rolling or action, there's some intuitive thing, it clicks in and I'm there. It helps that in the movies you play yourself.
Really?
If I were playing some really far out character, I imagine I probably would do more preparation.
What's the furthest role you've ever played from yourself?
It's hard to say. Well, Wimpy was kind of far from me. But since I started doing films, it's frequently me, in many ways, even that repressed personality part. But
Now, how do you prepare to play Wimpy? Do you read the comic? Do you?
Well, some of it was just technical. I'd been a cartoonist when I was a kid, and I loved all the cartoons, and I followed them like I followed radio comedians. I noticed that even then, and then later when I started studying up on it, that Wimpy was always in a picture, and he was always in the background, and frequently there was a hill in front of him, and that's a trick cartoonists do, so they have to draw the whole body. Someone's in the background, they draw a hill or a fence, but I noticed he always had his eyes shut. He's drawn with little half moons, and he doesn't seem to have a mouth. He just has 4 whiskers here. So I'm able to have my eyes almost closed, and I can still see. I did the whole performance, like he's walking around asleep, But I could see. I'd leave a little bit there. And another thing I did was, I was desperately afraid I might look like either Reginald Van Gleeson, a fat man doing comedy, or Oliver Hardy, whom I adore. But Wimpy has these kind of bangs. So I had them wax them in a way so they'd never go here. That's what Oliver Hardy has. And there's a tendency, I wanted to do the voice that Gleason did, which was, how sweet it is. But I shied away from that. And I talked in a more normal, but it'd be perfect for Wimpy, really, if he played Wimpy. I'd gladly pay you Tuesday. Want a hamburger today. Be perfect. So I didn't do anything vocally like that, but I wanted to find a way to move, and nobody would remember this unless you're ancient like myself. There was a character actor in early movies named Henry Armetta. He always played restaurant owners with an Italian accent.
Oh, was he the yes guy?
No, that's another guy. That's with Jack Benny. Henry Armetta would always advance toward the camera or toward anybody he was advancing on, tilted sort of sideways with his hand on his rib cage. Hey, welcome to my place. So come in, please. I have a nice pasta, And he always played that same character. And so I didn't put my hand on my rib cage, but I walked slightly tilted when I did Wimpy. I used his walk, which gave it a kind of a turn. When I did Breaking Away, I didn't plan on how I'm going to do him physically, but when I tried on my costumes, I made a bold move. Everybody wants to suck in their gut and not look fat, which I was. I had a bit of a gut on me, but I took the leap that I pulled my belt below my gut and I pushed it forward instead of sucking it in. And because of vanity, nobody really wants to do that when you're 20 times bigger than life on the screen. But I thought that's a great way to do this guy. He's now working a used car lot and he's not exercising and he's getting older. Then I found that when I walked around like that, it caused me to be a little splay-footed, like a little duck walk. It's something about what it did to my stature is it made me walk a little duck-footed, so it widened my feet. And then because you push your gut forward, it brings your shoulders back, and so it gives you a whole shape. And I just found the character physically, basically from dropping.
Almost by accident.
Yeah.
I'm curious, hearing that, if you put as much preparation into a role in like Shakes the Clown, for example, as you would something like Insomnia, which is far more serious fare.
Well, I figured I was a father figure in Insomnia to Al Pacino, who had known me years before when we both worked in L.A. and now I'm in Alaska. I don't have to prepare too much to be a father figure. I have 4 of my own and a couple I don't know about. No, I approached the agent for the clowns and Shakes the Clown in an instinctive way, and just, there's some. I'm sure people who have done comedy know there's just sometimes a little click in your head. There's a little button, or there's a thing you just click into, like you use your mouse and point on it. It's a lot of it's instinctive. Mm-hmm. It's like this is my be slightly funny thing. I like to play dumb characters too.
Really?
Yeah. And I can do that very well. It's my training in West Virginia.
Method acting. I imagine it must be close to impossible, but could you pick a favorite role from all the ones you've played?
Sure, Breaking Away. When you have a great script,
Mm-hmm.
People have hired me ever since then, many, many, many times, and I think they believe, oh, we'll get Dooley, he'll play the father, and we'll get the same thing in our script that he got in the other one. But they forget the writing. Mm-hmm. It's never as interesting. It's never as well planned. They also forget the other people in the cast. They forget the director. They think, you get this actor, it'll make the whole difference, But I can only wring so much water out of a damp washcloth. But I keep trying, And it's okay with me if I have performances, someone says, well, that's a mediocre performance. Well, I'm an actor, and they're not all winners, I just try as hard as I can to make it interesting.
Now, Dennis Christopher, who played your son in Breaking Away, he's played your son a couple other times in projects.
Yes, in A Wedding, he was a son. He didn't have a very big part, but he was my son there. I partly got that job because I was his father.
Really?
In Wedding. They couldn't find a father for Breaking Away. They'd even talked to Art Carney about it. And of all people, Henry Gibson, but which I can't imagine. I think Art could do it, but Henry doesn't seem to be the Midwestern type. And I've worked with him, with Robert Altman. But someone, Bob Altman and Steve Tesich and Peter Yates, who directed it, they all have the same agent, a famous guy in New York named Sam Cohn, and who handles everybody who's anybody, like Meryl Streep and Woody Allen and Mike Nicholson. It's a great, great agent. And they're knocking it around in the office. They can't find a guy to play the father. And someone said, how about the guy that played his father in Breaking Away? And so I came in and read and got it. It came about that way.
Because it's such a very natural father-son relationship. I don't know if that was instantaneous when you met Dennis, or if you worked on that.
I got to know him on Wedding, and you get very close on any film, really, but you get closer on an Altman film. We don't just eat together at lunch. We go out at night, and Bob has everyone come to the dailies, and it's very, very much like summer camp. And I was fond of Dennis. And he called me about 3 years ago and said, I have a part in Law and Order. And they need a father, so I played his father in Law and Order. We both got led away in handcuffs at the end. Then I worked once on another, I wasn't his father, but I played a priest on a drama once, a television show that he was in. He was playing a guy who stood in front of the church using Christ's words, but the parishioners said it's not seemly. He's dressed badly and everything. So the parishioners wanted him taken away, wanted him arrested or something. And he had every right to be there, and he was using lines from the Bible. I don't think they call them lines in the Bible. But he had to have a meeting with me, and I was the bishop or, the priest or whatever. I remember who's Danny DeVito's wife.
Rhea Perlman.
Rhea Perlman was her series. It lasted one season.
Oh, really?
And she was in that scene.
At this point in your career, I have to imagine you don't have to audition for roles.
Wrong.
Really? Every actor in here just got really happy.
Now, oddly enough, I'll get an offer to be in a real good movie, a mainstream movie, with no audition. I just did Hairspray in Toronto, the musical being made into a movie, with no audition. But dinky little sitcoms will want to have me come in and read their stupid script. So if I'm not doing anything else,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not too prideful. You know, I spent so many years reading and auditioning. It's, who am I? I can't audition now. If it means I'll get a job in something, it's maybe fun. I always think every job is just, it'll get you a good job. You know, I take a lot of parts. I say, well, maybe somebody will see me in this and give me a real job. Or I have some good jokes or something.
Maybe you should go back to commercials and catch you off of that.
I'd be doing denture cream commercials now.
Do you still, to this day, learn new things about acting?
I do, yeah. I always find things out. I learn about acting by watching other actors, too. There's a moment that Anthony Hopkins does in a movie. What's the name of it, Winnie?
It's the Remains of the Day.
Remains of the Day. Emma Thompson's interested in him, he's interested in her, but neither of them want to show it. He's behind his desk in a tiny room, and she's on the other side. And he goes to the corner to get a book for her, and she comes around the corner and gets too much in his safety zone. And he puts his hand up like this. And it makes me tearful to think how good that was. He spoke volumes with one hand. You know, you knew everything about what was going on in his head. And it was nothing like, you know, nothing like this, you know. So simple, so, you know.
Are there any kind of roles that you haven't played? Like, I was just thinking it'd be great to see you in a Merchant Ivory movie.
If they make your movie, I'd like to play you. Yeah. I did a thing that, it's not like Anthony Hopkins, but I did a scene in a moment in Breaking Away, which I happen to love. It's in that vein anyway. It's not him, but I drive to the racetrack. My wife's already there. I come in, it's already in progress. My son comes around the corner, and I start to cheer him with my hand. I just made this up. But something in me and my character made me arrest my gesture in midair. So it wasn't like, yes! It was like, it was exactly who he is. He didn't like to show his emotions, but there was that cheer trying to break through. So every time I see that, I like that, but it just happened to me. I didn't plan that.
It wasn't in the script that way?
No, nothing like that. It just went. Half a congratulation. But I knew it came out of my playing my dad, you know, who very rarely did that for me.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had to really fight or campaign for a role that you wanted?
It's very hard to campaign unless you're well known. Mm-hmm. You can't even get a phone call through to a director or a producer. No, I haven't. Probably if I could have gotten through to people and tried to campaign, it's not in my personality to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the worst networker in the entire world. You know? I could call Bob Altman up every year and he's making a new movie and say, "Hi Bob, how's it going?" You know? But I always think I sound like I'm asking for a job, and I don't want to do that to him because imagine how many actors call him up.
Yeah.
"Hey Bob, how's it going?" Because they know he's casting or he will be casting. My theory is always if he knows what I can do and if he wants me, he'll call me. Mm-hmm. And anybody else I've worked for, but that's probably not a great way to run a career. But I'm not a very good networker.
You called Jules Pfeiffer?
You called Jules Pfeiffer to get the...
One time in my life I networked and I got a job out of it. No, a friend of mine said, Andrew Duncan, and I were in a play by Jules Pfeiffer called The White House Murder Case, directed by Arkin. And a year later, Jules is going to do an off-Broadway play of comic strips. And I'm talking to my friend Andrew, who was my improvising partner in our little company. He says, "Jules called me. He says, you want to be in this thing we're doing?" I said, "No, Jules, I don't feel like being in the play right now." So I hung up and I said, "Damn it, Jules knows me. He knows I can do comedy just like Andrew. Why didn't he call me?" And they had that petty moment, which we all have, I suppose. I know I have. But instead of just letting it go, I picked up the phone and called Jules Pfeiffer and said, Jules, you're doing a show? Yeah. Can I come in and see you about it? Sure. I'm sorry I didn't call you. I mean, you'll be, yeah, come on in. So I got that job. If I hadn't done it, Bob Altman wouldn't have seen me. So
Exactly.
that networking stuff really works. I did it once. One time.
What is it that you like the most about being an actor?
Well, it used to be getting laughs. And even when you're doing a film, there's a laugh in there. There's nobody, the crew won't laugh. But after a lot of experience, it's going to be funny in a theater because you're using the same timing and the same sensibilities and the language is funny enough. So I get a kick out of even doing a film that's comedy because somewhere, someday, somebody's going to laugh, like the Christopher Guest things. I forgot the other half of that question.
What you like most about being an actor?
Yeah. I don't know. It's first of all, there's great camaraderie. And I like the sense of working with other actors and scenes where there's more than one person. I like the scenes with a number of people, which is a lot what Bob Altman does. I was in the Mornings at 7 with this great cast, and we won some kind of an award here in town for being the best ensemble.
I believe it was the Backstage West Garland
I
Award.
think you were there. Yeah. So I got up, and we all said thank you. There were 4 or 5 of us. And I said something I'd thought before, but I never knew I would say it on stage. And I said something that brought tears to my eyes. I said, I'm honored to be not only in a group of actors this wonderful, but in the acting profession itself. And I was kind of thinking legit because that's where you really get to work with people. And I said, we're such a above average group of people. They're almost always kind, almost always intelligent. They usually have a sense of humor. You have a bad guy once in a while, some pain in the butt. But generally speaking, what kind of wonderful people is it to work with who are looking for the truth and looking for some kind of emotion? And it just, made me really tearful to say that. And it came about partly because that was a wonderful company. But it just is true of what I think about the acting profession, It's a little bit watered down in the film business and television business and running around town doing auditions, and you don't interact with actors very much. And often you're reading with a casting director, and they have wonderful acting abilities. Altman doesn't even audition people. He has them come in and say hello, and he never told me I want to use you in the movie. I went back there 2 or 3 times in a week, and on the 3rd visit he said, I found your daughter. And I said, that must mean I'm going to be the father. But he never told me.
Are you sure you had the part?
As it turned out.
I imagine you've seen this business change for actors over the years. I don't know if you feel it's changed for the better or for the worse, or it's just the nature of the beast.
Well, I think the culture has changed a lot in the last 15 or 20 years. Not because of actors or anything, but they've become a part of it. I think people under 30 will think I'm just an old fogey, but anybody who's 50 or around that era, around that age, will understand what I'm talking about. Is that the culture has gotten meaner. Sitcoms are full of nothing but insults. If you go back to Dick Van Dyke, he and Laura, and they made fun of Mel, but it didn't feel like it was mean-spirited. It was fun. And Mary Tyler Moore, even when they talked about Ted, they somehow still liked him. But everything now is family members walk in a room and insult each other. That's all the comedy. And that's all the reality shows are put together to humiliate people. And they pick people who will get into arguments with each other. They don't pick a group of wonderful people. There won't be any conflict. But it's indicative of the culture. And, I don't know if it started with Jerry Springer, but it's around there somewhere. It's just that with this 15 minutes of fame thing, and people are so willing to look so ugly and mean and show their worst side, and I just don't understand it. But it really means something to me when it gets into the work we do, because a lot of mainstream comedies are nothing but mean. I don't need to see another movie where a man is kicked in the groin. Why they think that's funny, I have no idea. I think the men in the audience are thinking, thank God it's not me. But, throwing up on people's shoes and, I like to aim a little bit higher. Throw up on their belt. No, I'm kidding. No, I personally like to watch stuff that aims a little higher. Mm-hmm. And I like to do those kind of things. Like my wife can't have highways. So there's a little subtlety in that.
What are the things that these days that make you laugh?
I haven't really liked much television comedy for a long time, but I loved Seinfeld, I loved Larry Sanders, I love The Simpsons, and
Curb Your Enthusiasm?
I like The Office sometimes. I don't watch it on a regular basis. I like Steve Carell a lot. Mm-hmm. I love Jon Stewart, and Colbert. But those guys are working with a lot of brains,
Mm-hmm. Smart comedy.
And they're not about insults, really. Well, they end up insulting the president, but they do it in a sly way.
And he has it coming.
I do like to watch young comedians, but I have to say that the good ones are few and far between. There's so much of them imitating Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. It began when they started imitating Robert Klein, when it began to be observational comedy. No one comes out now and tells a joke, which is a joke as such. That's all gone. It's considered passé for a comic to come out and say, two guys meet in a bar and do this. And for hundreds of years before, those were popular.
Yeah.
That's when I started liking comedy, when there were jokes.
I want to take some audience questions in a minute here, and I hesitate to use the word advice. But I mean, I'm sure there are so many actors here who would love to have a career half as prolific as yours. Has there been a secret for you or advice that someone gave you about staying in this business?
I don't think so. I think I was just stupidly and doggedly staying in it because I didn't know how to do anything else. And I thought maybe someday I'll be able to be as good as I was in high school and college, where there were some other people who weren't very good at it. I have a joke answer. Ask me what's my advice for an actor moving to L.A.
What's your advice for an actor moving to L.A.?
Take Fountain.
I wish someone had given me that advice when I moved here.
No, it would be nice if you could give advice, but the thing is there's no answer. Mm-hmm. If someone knew the answer, the good advice, they'd be king, It's like how to write a script for the movies. No one knows. No one knows how they get made or anything, Good stuff falls by the wayside, bad stuff gets produced. Mediocre actors become stars. And good actors can't get a job. There's a great deal of it's in luck. Mm-hmm. Anything I ever did that I would advise is to take everything that comes along. I used to know people, we'd do commercials and they got successful. They'd say, I'm not doing any more commercials at scale. It's really a scale business. And you can make a lot of money at scale with residuals. I'm going to get double scale. And so they suddenly aren't making as many commercials. Mm-hmm. And maybe when they do make them, they'll make. But I did everything. I never raised my price. Actors that say I won't do demos, which are half-price radios or half-price TV things, tests. I won't do industrials, I did everything. Yeah. Wherever I could work, I did, and you always learn something and meet somebody. And interesting example is I used to work for this company that made industrials for Xerox, IBM, places like that. They used to pay my partner and I $500 a day, and we would write the sketches and perform them. This is Andrew Duncan, my old friend. And I went away and made about 4 movies. And I ran into this guy. He says, I was talking to you just the other day with IBM. They'd like to do something else with you. I said, as a joke, yeah, but I'm more expensive now. But I was really kidding him. Yeah. Because I was free. I'd do it for $500 a day. So I said, but now I have an agent, so call him. So he gets me $5,000 a day. I'm the same guy to do industrials, So Andrew and I wrote them and we performed them. And it's just, the idea of visibility or something.
So what you're saying to any directors here in the audience is that you'll work cheap?
I had an unusual spate. In 4 weeks, I did 3 movies. They're all 2-day parts. Mm-hmm. And they're all scale, all independence. Winnipeg, Albuquerque, and Alaska. But I like to keep busy. Yeah. But actors, we'd do it if they didn't pay us. And frequently we do.
Absolutely.
We're not in it for the money. That's why when people say, oh, sure, his series is not on the air anymore, but he's got a lot of money in the bank, he's rich. That's not why we became actors. These guys are at home saying, oh my God, I wish I could be in something. It's not enough just to have done it. Michael Richards can tell you that. No, but really, I think all of us really just want to do the work. And sure, you may be able to afford to retire and have a nicer house, but that's not satisfying, just having money. Mm-hmm. And I was poor enough in the beginning that I don't care if I have money or not.
Now you can let your wife do all the work.
Well, actually, I do have money now because of her.
We have a question from Jack English. Wants to know if you're writing a book.
No, I'm not, but a lot of people ask me that, but I think I'm too lazy.
Didn't you write a screenplay with someone in this room?
What's that?
Did you write a screenplay?
About my life?
With someone in this room?
Oh, yes, this is my son Adam right here. We wrote a screenplay about my growing up, and so far no one's anxious to do it, but we're sending it out, and it's turned out to be a wonderful script, and it was his idea that we do it. He thought we could take some of the events of my life and make it into an interesting story, which we did. It's really good. And it's called The Summer My Brother Left Home. That's what happened in one of the events. This guy who just asked the question knows me from making the rounds in New York and going for commercials. And he says he'd lost jobs to me back in New York. Now, a lot of people say that to me, but I haven't made that commitment. I know the name of it would be called Movie Dad, because that's how people kind of spot me.
What are you most frequently recognized for, like on the street?
Under 30, 16 Candles. Over 30, Breaking Away. People who don't have any age, they like Larry David or Chris Guest.
A question here from Jeff Brown, I think. Want to know about some of your voiceover work. I know you did a voice in Cars.
Yeah. I play Sarge, the World War II Jeep, because it was the oldest car in the movie, and I was the oldest guy in the movie. And I used to do it for cereals back in New York, like all those Frankenberry, Count Chocula kind of commercials, and Tricky Rabbits, and there was always a lot of voice work in those commercials. I haven't done much of it out here. There's a movie called, I did another feature recently, trying to think of the name of it. It's an animated feature, and people break into a grocery store at night and do weird things, and I played the owner of the grocery store. Food Fight. It's called Food Fight. A lot of grotesque beings are there. They're like the beasties. And I played the guy that owns the supermarket. I do like to write, and I've written a screenplay with Adam, and I wrote another screenplay by myself, and I wrote a short where I used Tim Conway and Harvey Korman, and my wife and I, and Jeffrey Tambor, and Bob Balaban. But it's not finished yet. It's only been in the works for 5 years. And I'm writing an idea with Adam for an animated, animated cartoon series we're working on. So I do a bit of writing in the last 5 or 10 years. But I have a SAG pension, AFTRA, equity, and Social Security. Because I'm not 75, I'm 79. But 75 is a better joke number. I'm in my late 60s, I'm 74. Late 60s, I'm 79. It's not as good a joke. So I changed my age for that. And she's 80.
We actually have a special treat. You were going to do
Rice
some
Krispies?
improv for. No, I can't bake.
Yes, let us all go home, and I'll give you 5 minutes of something. Okay?
Yeah, do you want to explain it? I think you probably
You can help me get a suggestion. Any line from Hamlet.
Anyone, a line from Hamlet.
Solid flesh from milk.
I'm sorry?
Is too solid flesh from milk.
Did you hear that? Because I can't repeat it.
Oh, that this too.
That this too solid flesh would melt. Okay.
Should I get out of the way?
You're not in the way, but you may sit down if you like. You'll be another member of the audience.
I'd love to watch, yeah.
Since 1961, when I started in Second City, I found that I love to not do Shakespeare, but kind of make fun of it and have fun with it. And so what I'm going to do for you now is to improvise a poem, but in the honesty department, I'm going to tell you that I've done it a couple of thousand times, and on the shelf in the back of my mind are phrases and couplets and quatrains. They're just there. And if I find myself in need of a rhyme, I just bring it forward. So it'll be an improved improv version. It's Hamlet and all of his travails. Okay. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw and resolve itself into a dew. God forbid this should happen to you. For cannot it be that I am here yet a lily-livered coward who cannot think or believe or try or cope with that standing there before me, my uncle there, and all the hope I had for my father upon the parapet who never came down. But once I went there to find him, and there behind him, another ghost, his ghost, the ghost of a ghost. Oh, how will I ever revenge my father? How can I bring myself to call, as it were, upon the carpet, Claudius, my uncle? Oh, uncle, uncle, burning bright. Stay thou away from mother tonight. If thou come near, thou wilt be cursed. For uncle dear, I saw her first. Oh, what then can I hope in these times from this chastened breast to bring forth the courage, the anger which I have boiling under, but cannot bring here and put asunder what he has? Oh, I can't but hark. Oh, soft they come here. See how she walks. See how he does hold her arm. There they are upon that throne. There that throne. Oh, uncle, uncle, uncle. Oh, wicked uncle. Oh, strumpet mother. Go on, bang the drum and blow your trumpet, mother. Say what you will. I will ne'er accept him. Hey, nonny, nonny, hey, nonny, no. My uncle's a king, my mother's a hoe. Ah, could I but turn to those voices of the past that had helped me there, and then at last know what I needed to, a skull. Still dead and dull, but alas for Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. He told me jokes, he did fellatio. But soft now he speaks. He has asked about the players. The players will come before you and act out the murder of Gonzago. And nothing, dear uncle, rhymes with Gonzago. Oh, the anger, the bile that doth rise in me. Oh, would I had the courage, why can I not act? If I had the stomach for it, the spleen, the kidney, the large intestines, anything, I could confront thee, draw my blade, and to taste your blood. But no, I hang back. I am a boy. I cannot act. I sheath my blade. Oh. The disgust doth rise in me with the bile. Oh, look there, how upon the throne he sits, fondling my mother's tits. Oh, in his life, uncle, in his life you did envy him, his wife. Yes, as you did look at my father and his beautiful wife, you did envy him, his wife. And more than that, you also had a bone on for the throne on which he sat. but soft. You shall not go to bed with her tonight. And if you do, but soft. Oh, uncle, thou hast taken away my good name. A prince I would be, but thou hast taken all away. Nor can I find that name since. You leave me simply a poor Danish lad, formerly known as Prince. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's amazing.
Thank you all.